The wind that swept through the Colorado mountains carried the smell of pine and wood smoke, and for 9-year-old Lydia Mae Thompson, it also carried a promise she did not yet understand. She sat on the front steps of the small trailer she shared with her Aunt Claire, clutching a wrinkled envelope that bore her name in looping handwriting. It was the first time Lydia had ever received mail addressed only to her, and the weight of the letter seemed far heavier than its few sheets of paper should allow. Claire moved about inside the trailer, the sound of dishes clinking as she finished washing up from their modest breakfast. The trailer sat on the outskirts of Pine Hollow, a town that barely deserved the name, no more than a cluster of cabins, a gas station, and a single store where neighbors met each other as often as they bought supplies. Lydia and Claire had been here for nearly 7 years, ever since Lydia's parents had died on the mountain road in a late winter storm. The envelope had arrived 2 weeks earlier, delivered by a postman who seemed surprised. There was even a mailbox at the edge of their rocky driveway. Inside had been a letter written by a lawyer from Denver. It said her grandfather, whom she had never met, had left her something in his will. Claire called it a mistake. A cruel joke, perhaps, but Lydia could not stop reading and rereading the words, "You have inherited the Morrison Ranch, Copper Ridge." On that morning, the sun filtered pale gold through the pines and the mountains rose like walls of stone and sky around their small home. Lydia's chest tightened with a feeling she could not quite name. Belonging, hope, maybe even love. If there was a place waiting for her, even a broken-down old ranch, then perhaps she was not as forgotten as she sometimes felt. Claire appeared at the doorway, drying her hands on a towel. She was 68, her face lined with years of mountain weather, her hair pulled back in its usual tight braid. She looked at the envelope in Lydia's hands and sighed. "Child, you've got to let that go," she said, her voice weary but not unkind. "A piece of paper doesn't change the world. That ranch has been empty longer than you've been alive. What could it possibly give you now but heartache?" Lydia traced the letters of her name on the envelope. "But it says it's mine. What if there's something still there waiting for me?" Claire shook her head. "The taxes alone would drown us. Fences, fallen roofs, leaking nothing but ghosts up there." She sat down beside Lydia on the steps, her weight making the wood creak. "Your grandfather loved that land more than he ever loved people. He stayed when he should have helped his family, and it broke us apart. I don't want you carrying his mistakes." But Lydia was not listening fully. She was remembering the half-stories she had overheard from old men at the store, talking about Samuel Thompson's stubbornness, his herd of horses, the way he built water channels that still trickled through the hillsides. They spoke of him like a legend, half admiration, half bitterness. That afternoon, Lydia walked the mile to old Mr. Henderson's cabin. He was 83, a man of few words but many stories, and he often let her sit on his porch while he whittled wood into shapes, only he seemed to recognize until they were finished. "Afternoon, Lydia," he said without looking up, his knife moving steady along a pine branch. "You've got a look in your eye today. Something stirring." She held out the letter already creased from so much folding and unfolding. "They say my grandfather left me his ranch." The knife paused. Henderson's pale blue eyes lifted to meet hers. "Copper Ridge." She nodded. "Well now," he said softly, setting the knife aside. "Your grandfather was a hard man, but he loved that land like it was blood in his veins. If he truly left it to you, there's reason behind it. But it's been empty for years," she said. Henderson gave a small smile. "Empty is a word that depends on who's using it. Sometimes a place that looks empty is fuller than any town you'll ever walk through." The next morning before Claire could rise, Lydia packed a small satchel with bread, an apple, and the journal she used for scribbling down stories. She slipped the envelope inside too. The trail to Copper Ridge was steep, but she had walked parts of it before following deer paths and listening to the rush of streams. This time, though, she meant to go farther to see the ranch with her own eyes. The air grew cooler as she climbed, her boots crunching over last autumn's leaves. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the trees, and now and then a squirrel darted across the path. After 2 hours, the trees thinned, and she came to a clearing where 2 stone pillars marked an overgrown entrance. A wooden sign hung between them, faded but still legible, "Copper Ridge Ranch." Her heart thudded as she stepped through. What she saw first was the house. 2 stories of dark logs and shuttered windows, its porch sagging but still standing proud against the years. Beyond it rose a barn, its red paint worn to brown, and scattered outbuildings leaning with age. Fences lay broken and the grass gates swung on rusted hinges. But it was not the buildings that made her stop in her tracks. It was the animals. Horses, their coats shining even in neglect, grazed in the meadow. Goats climbed rocks and stumps bells around their necks, making faint music. Chickens scratched near the porch steps as though the house had never been abandoned. And from somewhere deeper in the pasture came the low call of cattle. Lydia pressed her hand to her chest, unable to breathe for a moment. It was as if time had been, as if the place had been waiting all these years, not for anyone, but for her. A chestnut mare with a white blaze lifted her head and looked directly at the girl standing at the edge of the clearing. They regarded each other across the distance, and Lydia felt a strange recognition, a thread tying her to this place. She stepped forward, her legs trembling, yet the horse did not shy away. Instead, the animal's ears flicked forward, and she took a slow step closer, as if welcoming her. Lydia whispered, barely audible, "I'm home." And in that moment, beneath the shadow of the mountains, surrounded by creatures who had survived against all odds, she believed it was true. The chestnut mare lowered her head until her breath fanned warm against Lydia's open hand. Her muzzle was softer than Lydia imagined, the velvety touch stirring something inside her that felt both ancient and brand new. She stroked the horse's face with trembling fingers, and for the first time in years she felt completely seen, as though the animal knew her name before she spoke it. Behind her, the wind carried a sound that didn't belong to the wilderness. A creak of hinges, a shuffle of boots on old boards. Lydia turned sharply. The front door of the house was ajar, moving with the draft. Her first thought was that someone else was here. Her second thought was that maybe the stories of Copper Ridge being empty were not entirely true. She hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The mare nudged her shoulder, urging her forward, and with a gulp of air, she walked toward the porch. The wooden steps groaned beneath her weight. Dust coated the doorframe, yet she could see fresh marks on the handle as if it had been opened recently. Pushing gently, she slipped inside. The air smelled of wood smoke and old leather, of a life paused but never abandoned. Furniture stood under white sheets. A stone fireplace loomed against one wall, and on the mantel sat a journal bound in cracked brown leather. She reached for it, heart hammering. The first page bore handwriting she had never seen before, but somehow recognized Samuel Thompson daily notes. The entries listed weather feed amounts, births of foals, treatments given for coughs or lameness. She flipped ahead, then froze. The handwriting changed halfway through. The ink strokes were neater, smaller, belonging to another hand entirely, and the dates continued up to just last week. Someone had been living here, tending the ranch, recording everything. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Lydia's breath caught. She snapped the journal shut and hugged it to her chest. Before she could decide whether to run, a voice called gently down the stairwell. "You must be Lydia May." She spun. Descending the staircase was a tall, thin man with silver hair and a worn jacket dusted with hay. His steps were careful, his back a little bent, but his eyes were sharp and kind. He carried a leather satchel that clinked faintly with metal tools. "Who are you?" Lydia asked, though her voice trembled. "Samuel Hartwell," he said, stopping at the bottom. "I was your grandfather's friend and his veterinarian. I've been keeping this place alive since the day he left." Lydia gripped the journal tighter. "You've been here all this time?" He nodded. "Every week, twice a week. The animals couldn't care for themselves, and Sam asked me to watch over them until his heir arrived." "His heir," she whispered, stunned. Dr. Hartwell's eyes softened. "That would be you." He gestured for her to follow him outside. Still dazed, Lydia obeyed. They walked toward the barn, where several horses poked their heads over the half doors, nickering in recognition of him. He set down his satchel, opened it, and pulled out brushes, small bottles, and rolls of bandage. "Your grandfather believed every creature deserved dignity," he said, running his hand along the neck of a dapple gray. "He left instructions, and I promised I'd keep them until the right person came. When I saw you just now, I knew Sam was right. You have his eyes." Lydia touched the mare beside her, the one who had greeted her in the field. "What's her name?" "Duchess," Dr. Hartwell said with a smile. She was Sam's favorite. Strong, clever, stubborn, much like him. The mare nudged Lydia again, as if confirming the truth of it. "But how can I take care of all of this?" Lydia asked, her voice cracking. "I'm just a child. I don't know anything about ranching." "Neither did Sam when he began," the veterinarian replied, placing a brush in her hand. "He learned by listening, not only to people, but to the animals themselves." They'll teach you if you pay attention. So she tried. All that afternoon, she followed Dr. Hartwell as he moved from pen to pen, showing her how to approach each animal calmly, how to check for signs of sickness, how to clean hooves and recognize the difference between a hungry call and a frightened one. She learned their names: Thunder, a black stallion with surprising gentleness; Patches, a spotted pony rescued from a carnival; Sunrise and Sunset, Palomino twins who never strayed far from each other. Everywhere she looked, she saw proof that someone had cared deeply. Buckets carved with initial troughs aligned to catch spring water salt licks, placed at measured intervals. This was no accident of survival. It was a sanctuary. As the sun slid low and the meadow turned gold, Claire's voice rang out from the trail. "Lydia Mae Thompson, what on earth are you doing?" Aunt Claire burst into the clearing, her cheeks flushed from the climb, Mr. Henderson close behind with his walking stick. Both froze when they saw the animals moving freely across the land. "Good Lord," Claire whispered. "How are they alive?" "Thanks to him," Lydia said quickly, pointing to Dr. Hartwell. Henderson squinted. "Sam Hartwell. I should have known. Only fool stubborn enough to keep this place going." Hartwell inclined his head. "Guilty as charged." Claire looked torn between fury and wonder. "You've risked your pension, your health for 15 years, why?" "Because Sam asked me to," he answered simply. "And because some promises are worth keeping." The words silenced her. She turned to Lydia, who was standing with Duchess at her side, eyes shining. "Aunt Claire, this is ours," Lydia said, her voice trembling but strong. "We can't walk away." Claire pressed a hand to her forehead, then looked at the barn. The pasture, the animals grazing like ghosts come back to life. She had spent years protecting Lydia from disappointment, warning her not to hope for too much. But what she saw here was undeniable. "There will be taxes," Claire murmured. "Repairs feed costs more than we can manage." "Sam planned for that," Hartwell said. "There's a trust fund. It was meant for the animals' care until Lydia came of age, but the bank froze it when Sam passed." "I've been covering the costs myself." "Why didn't you tell us?" Claire demanded. "Because I wasn't sure she would ever come, and because the fewer who knew, the safer it was." Henderson tapped his stick against the ground. "Safe from what?" Hartwell's expression darkened. "Developers. Mining companies. They've been circling Copper Ridge for years. They know what's beneath these hills. Copper, rare earth minerals. They'd flatten the land and scatter every creature here if given the chance. Sam fought them all his life. Now they're waiting to see if his heir will fight too." The clearing grew still. The weight of his words pressed on Lydia's shoulders, heavier than the envelope had ever been. She looked at Duchess, who rested her head against her arm, with trust so absolute it hurt. "Then I'll fight," Lydia whispered. "I have to." Night was falling by the time they began the walk back down the trail. Henderson led the way with his stick. Claire kept close to Lydia, and Hartwell carried his satchel of tools. When they reached the truck parked at the road, Claire helped Lydia climb inside. But before she shut the door, she crouched to meet her niece's eyes. "This isn't going to be easy," she said softly. "Men with money don't like to be told no. They'll come at us hard." Lydia gripped her aunt's hand. "They can come however they want. Copper Ridge belongs to us. It belongs to the animals." Claire studied her for a long moment, then nodded as though seeing the truth of it in her niece's determined gaze. As the truck rattled down the mountain road, the first stars appeared in the clear sky. Lydia rested her head against the window, the journal still pressed to her chest. Behind her, the ranch waited alive with breath and movement, and ahead of her stretched a battle she could not yet imagine. But somewhere deep in her heart, she knew she was no longer just a forgotten child. She was the keeper of Copper Ridge. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of mountain morning where every breath seemed sharper than glass. Lydia woke before Claire, unable to sleep after what she had seen the day before. She sat at the small kitchen table, the leather journal open in front of her. The entries blurred together in the dim light, but she kept tracing the words with her finger, as if touching them could anchor her to the promise her grandfather had made. Claire shuffled in, tying her robe tight, her hair still in its braid from the night before. She looked at the journal, then at Lydia's face. "You didn't sleep, did you?" "I couldn't," Lydia admitted. "Aunt Claire, he meant for me to have this place. He wanted me to take care of it." Claire poured herself coffee, silent for a long time. Then she sighed. "Wanting something and being able to keep it are two different things, child. We have no money, no standing." And Hartwell, he's done a miracle just keeping those animals alive. But he's old. He can't carry this forever. Lydia bit her lip, then whispered, "Then I'll learn. I'll help him." Before Claire could reply, a knock rattled the trailer door. Lydia jumped. Visitors were rare this far out. Claire opened the door to find George Henderson standing on the steps leaning on his stick, his hat pulled low against the sun. "Morning," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Heard some noise in town already. Word's out about the ranch." Claire stiffened. "Already?" Henderson nodded. "Folks are whispering at the store. Some say the land's cursed. Some say it's worth a fortune. And the development men, well, they've had their eyes on Copper Ridge for years. They'll be sniffing around now." Claire muttered under her breath, then turned to Lydia. "This is what I feared. Once they know, they'll come with contracts and promises and threats." Henderson set his stick down with a thump. "Better be ready for a fight, but you won't be alone. I knew your grandfather. Stubborn man, but he loved that ridge. If you mean to stand your ground, I'll stand with you." Lydia's heart lifted. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson." He gave a small smile. "Don't thank me yet. Battles like these take more than good intentions. You'll need proof papers and more courage than most grown folk can muster." Later that day, Claire reluctantly agreed to drive Lydia back up to Copper Ridge. She said it was so they could speak with Hartwell again, but Lydia knew she wanted to see for herself whether the animals had truly survived in such numbers. The drive was long and rough, the truck jolting over rocks and ruts. But when they pulled up to the old stone pillars and walked the last stretch of trail, the ranch unfolded before them, just as it had for Lydia. Yesterday alive, pulsing with movement. Duchess stood waiting at the fence line, ears pricked as though she had been watching for their return. Dr. Hartwell was already at work carrying a pail toward the barn. When he saw them, he set it down and waved. "I wondered if you'd be back," he said. Claire crossed her arms. "We need the truth. How have they lasted all these years?" Hartwell gestured around them. Sam built systems most ranchers would envy. Spring-fed water lines, pastures rotated to keep grass, healthy shelters tucked against the wind. He planned for more than just himself. He planned for endurance. All I did was keep the wheels turning. He led them into the barn. Inside, the air was warm with the smell of hay and animals. Stalls were swept buckets lined neatly against the wall tack hung in careful order. Claire blinked. "This doesn't look abandoned at all." "Because it isn't," Hartwell replied. "It's been alive every day, even if the world outside forgot." He handed Lydia a brush again. "Want to help?" She grinned and stepped into Duchess's stall, stroking the mare's neck as she worked. Claire watched, torn between worry and pride. Henderson leaned against the doorway, his old eyes sharp. "You see it, Claire," he said quietly. "This child belongs here. Sam knew it. Hartwell knows it, and the animals sure as rain know it." Claire pressed her lips together. "Belonging doesn't pay taxes." Hartwell wiped his hands on a rag. "Sam left a trust. But there's more papers hidden, I think. He was always careful, too. Careful, maybe. If we can find them, we'll have proof enough to secure the ranch." Lydia looked up quickly. "Where would they be?" Hartwell's gaze drifted to the old house. "If I had to guess, somewhere only he would think to hide them." Sam believed in secrets, but he also believed in legacies. They spent the afternoon searching. In the kitchen drawers, they found nothing but mouse droppings and rusted spoons. In the attic, only dust and broken trunks. But in the living room behind the fireplace stones, Lydia's small hands brushed something cold and metallic. She tugged and a narrow box slid free. Her breath caught. "Aunt Claire, I found something." Hartwell hurried over, his eyes bright. He pried the box open with a tool from his satchel. Inside lay folded papers, sealed envelopes, and a smaller leather book. Claire lifted one page, scanning quickly. "It's the deed," she whispered. "And, oh heavens, environmental studies surveys banknotes." Hartwell exhaled. Sam thought of everything. Before they could study further, the sound of an engine rumbled up the trail. A green pickup truck rolled into the clearing and stopped near the barn. A man in a dark coat stepped out, his boots crunching on gravel. He was broad-shouldered, his hair slicked back, his eyes hidden behind tinted glasses, though the sun was fading. "Afternoon," he called, his voice smooth, too smooth. "Name's Carter. I represent Millfield Corporation. I believe you're occupying property that's in dispute." Claire stiffened. Henderson muttered a curse. Hartwell stepped forward, protective. "This is private land," he said firmly. "You've no business here." Carter smiled thinly. "Oh, but I do. My company's been interested in Copper Ridge for a long time. Your family never paid the taxes, and the county will be auctioning soon. Thought I'd save you the trouble of a fight. We're prepared to make a generous offer right now. He pulled a folded contract from his coat pocket, holding it out like bait. Claire's face paled. Hartwell shook his head. You think you can scare us with paperwork? Carter's smile never wavered. Not scare. Persuade. Take the money, walk away, and let professionals make use of this land. Otherwise, well, accidents happen in the mountains. Water lines break fires, spark animals wander off cliffs. Lydia stepped out from behind Duchess, her voice trembling but clear. We're not selling. Carter turned his hidden eyes toward her, studying the small girl with surprising interest. Then he chuckled softly. Sam's heir, I presume. You've got his stubborn streak. He tucked the contract back into his coat. Very well. But you'll learn soon enough that the mountains don't forgive children's dreams. With that, he climbed back into the truck and drove away, the sound of his engine echoing long after he disappeared. Silence fell heavy. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. Henderson muttered again. Hartwell looked at Lydia, pride and worry battling in his expression. They'll be back, he said grimly, and next time they won't come with polite words. Lydia held the journal to her chest. Then we'll be ready. Outside, the sky burned orange with sunset. The animals moved quietly through the fields, unaware of the storm gathering beyond their sanctuary. But Lydia knew with a certainty she had never felt before that Copper Ridge was not just her inheritance. It was her battle to fight, her promise to keep. That night, the trailer felt smaller than ever. Its thin walls, no match for the weight pressing down on everyone inside. Claire sat at the table with the box of paper spread across the surface, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Henderson dozed in the armchair, his stick leaning against his knee. Lydia curled on the couch, clutching the leather journal, listening to the steady tick of the old clock. Dr. Hartwell had driven back to his cabin after making sure Duchess and the others were secure for the evening. Before leaving, he warned them again. Millfield won't let go easily. They'll press harder each time. Claire rubbed her temples, scanning another document. Your grandfather was meticulous, she murmured. He kept records of water rights, grazing schedules, even environmental surveys. She tapped one page. This one proves the ranch was never abandoned. He arranged for Hartwell to act as caretaker. That should count for something in court. But they'll try to bury it, Henderson rasped without opening his eyes. Corporations have lawyers stacked higher than hay bales. They'll say Sam was delusional or that Hartwell had no legal standing. Lydia sat up. Then we have to show them the truth. Duchess Thunder, the goats, the cattle, they're alive because of him, because of this ranch. Doesn't that matter? Claire's gaze softened. To people like us, yes. To men like Carter, only the copper under the soil matters. Lydia felt a flare of anger. Then I'll make them see. I'll show everyone what my grandfather built. The words hung in the air, bold and impossible. Yet Claire saw something in her niece's eyes, something that reminded her of Samuel Thompson's stubborn fire. The following morning, they loaded the box of documents into Claire's old sedan and drove into Pine Hollow. The library there doubled as a town hall and meeting place, its shelves smelling of paper and dust. Waiting for them was Patricia Brennan, the lawyer whose letter had first informed Lydia of her inheritance. She was a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed but warm, her hair pulled back in a bun that had seen better days. She shook Claire's hand, then crouched to meet Lydia's gaze. So you're the young lady who inherited Copper Ridge. Your grandfather spoke of you. You know. Lydia blinked. He did. More than once, Brennan said with a smile. Sam worried he might not live to make amends with his family. He wanted to leave a gift that meant something. Looks like you found it. Claire opened the box. We found these hidden behind the fireplace. Deed studies notes. Hartwell believes they're enough to prove the ranch wasn't abandoned. Brennan sorted through the papers quickly, her practiced hands scanning signatures and seals. This is more than enough. Not only can we defend the inheritance, we can push for Copper Ridge to be declared a sanctuary. These environmental reports alone could block any mining attempt. Henderson grunted approval. Then it's worth fighting. Brennan leaned closer, lowering her voice. But you must understand, Millfield has money and influence. They'll try intimidation, maybe even sabotage. You'll need community support, not just documents. Lydia straightened her back. Then we'll get it. Later that afternoon, Brennan arranged a small gathering at the Pine Hollow Community Center. A dozen locals showed up, ranchers, shopkeepers, loggers, even the school teacher. Claire explained the inheritance. Henderson vouched for the family history, and Brennan laid out the threat of strip mining. When Lydia spoke, the room grew quiet. She told them about Duchess, about the carved buckets with her grandfather's initials, about the way the animals still trusted humans after 15 years. "This place isn't abandoned," she said softly. "It's alive. If Millfield takes it, they'll destroy everything." An older rancher stood. "My water comes from those springs. If they poison the ridge, Pine Hollow dries up." Others murmured agreement. The school teacher added, "Our children deserve to grow up with mountains, not slag heaps." By the end of the meeting, people were volunteering, some to help repair fences, others to spread word to neighboring towns. Claire watched in amazement as her quiet niece lit a spark that caught in weary eyes around the room. That night back at the trailer, Lydia could hardly keep still. "They listened, Aunt Claire. They care." Claire tried to smile, though worry still lined her face. "Hope is one thing, victory is another. We'll need both." Days turned into a rhythm. On Tuesdays and Fridays, Lydia went with Hartwell to Copper Ridge, learning how to feed, groom, and tend the animals. She learned the quirks of each one. Thunder liked his feed scattered wide sunrise and sunset. Whinnied if separated, goats would climb anything if left alone. On other days, Claire and Brennan worked through paperwork, filing injunctions, and preparing for court. Henderson visited, often bringing stories of Samuel Thompson and reminding Lydia that stubbornness could be a weapon as strong as any rifle. But just as Hartwell predicted, Millfield returned. One morning, they found surveyor flags driven into the ground along the old road, bright orange against the green. Another day, a truck left tire tracks near the pasture, and one of the water lines had been tampered with. Hartwell repaired it, but his face grew grimmer with each incident. "They're testing us," he muttered, "seeing how far they can push before we break." Claire grew tense, locking the trailer door at night, double-checking windows. Lydia kept the journal under her pillow as if it could shield her from corporate greed. One evening, while the sun bled red behind the peaks, Hartwell sat with Lydia on the porch of the ranch house. Duchess grazed nearby, her shadow long in the fading light. "You know," Hartwell said quietly, "Sam once told me Copper Ridge wasn't just land. He called it a promise. Said someday someone would come who loved it enough to keep it alive." Lydia hugged her knees. "Do you really think he meant me?" Hartwell studied her face, his pale eyes reflecting both sorrow and pride. "I've no doubt. The way you look at Duchess, the way the animals trust you already, that's no accident. You were meant to be here." His words settled in her chest like embers glowing with both warmth and weight. She knew then that no matter what threats Millfield sent, she could not turn back. A week later, Claire received a thick envelope stamped with Millfield's insignia. Inside was an offer, $50,000 for the immediate transfer of rights. It was more money than Claire had ever seen, enough to erase debts and live without struggle. Her hands shook as she showed it to Lydia. "This could change everything for us." Lydia looked at her aunt, then at the offer, then shook her head fiercely. It would change everything for them too. Duchess would be gone. Thunder Patches, all of them. "Is that what we want to buy with money?" Claire closed her eyes, torn between fear and love. Finally, she tore the papers in half. "You're right. We can't sell souls for dollars." The battle lines were drawn. That night, as Lydia lay awake listening to the mountains breathe through the open window, she whispered to the darkness, "I'll protect you. All of you." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and snow, and somewhere in the meadow, Duchess lifted her head as if she understood. Snow came early that year. By late October, the ridges around Pine Hollow were capped in white, and Copper Ridge itself seemed carved from frost and silence. Lydia bundled in borrowed coats, her breath fogging as she followed Hartwell through the morning chores. The animals needed more care in the cold, fresh, hay-thawed water blankets for the thinner ones. Duchess pressed close to Lydia's shoulder, her body heat a comfort against the bite of winter. Claire spent her days in town with Brennan, filing injunctions and preparing testimony. Henderson checked fences with his stick, grumbling about his joints but refusing to stay behind. The small community that once ignored the ranch now seemed bound to it, each person finding a role. But Millfield grew bolder. One morning they arrived to find a section of fence cut clean through. Another day, the storage shed had been broken into bags of feed, slashed open grains scattered uselessly across the snow. Hartwell's hands shook with rage as he cleaned up the mess. "They want us to give up," he muttered. "They think we'll tire before they do." We won't, Lydia said fiercely, though inside she trembled. 2 nights later, headlights swept across the trailer yard. Claire opened the door to find Carter again, standing in the cold with 2 men behind him. Their boots crunched on the gravel as they approached. Mrs. Thompson, Carter said smoothly, though his smile was razor-sharp. I see you received our offer. Generous, wasn't it? Claire's jaw tightened. We tore it up. Carter sighed theatrically. A shame. We could have avoided unpleasantness. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You're risking more than money. Accidents happen out here. A barn fire, a broken leg on the mountain. Would you want that on your conscience when it could have been prevented with a signature? Before Claire could respond, Lydia stepped forward. We're not selling. Carter's gaze flicked to her unreadable behind those tinted glasses. Then he smirked. Ah, the heir herself. Brave words from a child. But bravery doesn't pay bills. Remember that. He tipped his hat mockingly and walked back to his truck. Claire slammed the door after them, her face pale. They're going to push harder. Henderson spat into the fire. Let them push. The harder they push, the stronger we stand. But Lydia felt the weight of fear settling on her chest. That night she dreamed of flames consuming the barn animals, screaming Duchess vanishing into smoke. She woke with tears on her cheeks and the journal clutched to her chest. The next day, Brennan drove out from Denver with news. The court date's been set. She told them, spreading papers across the trailer table. 3 weeks from now, Millfield has filed a claim that the ranch was abandoned and is subject to county seizure. Claire's hands trembled. But we have the deed, the trust, the caretaker's notes, and we'll present them, Brennan said firmly. But understand they'll try to discredit everything. They'll call Hartwell senile. They'll call your grandfather's surveys fraudulent. We need more than documents. We need testimony. We need voices that can't be ignored. Lydia sat straighter. Then I'll testify. Claire nearly dropped her cup. Absolutely not. You're a child. I'm the heir, Lydia said, her voice trembling but steady. It's my ranch. They need to hear from me. Brennan studied her, then nodded slowly. Actually, she may be right. A child standing up for a sanctuary carries a weight no lawyer can manufacture. Judges are human. They listen with their hearts as much as their heads. Claire pressed a hand to her forehead. This is madness. But Lydia knew it was the only way. For the next 2 weeks, they prepared. Brennan coached Lydia, gently teaching her how to speak clearly, how to tell her story without getting lost in fear. Claire drilled her on details, names of animals, dates in the journal, the system Samuel Thompson had built. Hartwell told her stories of Sam giving her the words her grandfather might have spoken if he were alive. Community members visited daily. Ranchers pledged to speak about the water rights the schoolteacher promised to testify about the environmental value. Even the storekeeper offered records of hay purchased by Hartwell over the years. The circle of support widened, a quiet rebellion against the corporation's shadow. Still, Millfield's pressure mounted. Anonymous calls rang at the trailer late at night. Strange men lingered in the store parking lot when Claire went to town. Henderson found fresh tire tracks near the pasture at dawn, though no one admitted to being there. One evening, as Lydia brushed Duchess beneath a rising moon, she whispered, "Are we strong enough?" The mare's warm breath ruffled her hair, as if answering yes without words. Finally, the morning of the court hearing arrived. Snow fell in light flakes, dusting the roads as Claire drove them into Denver. Henderson sat in the back seat, his stick across his knees. Brennan met them at the courthouse steps, her arms full of files, her eyes sharp with determination. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polish and paper. The judge sat high behind his bench, his robe blending with the dark wood. Millfield's lawyers, 3 of them, crisp suits and colder expressions, lined one table. Carter sat among them, his glasses gleaming. Brennan guided Lydia and Claire to their table. Hartwell joined them, his hands steady despite his years. When the case was called, Millfield's lead lawyer rose first. His voice was smooth as silk, dripping with disdain. Your Honor, this land has been abandoned for over a decade. It is unsafe, unprofitable, and better suited for development that would bring jobs and revenue. The supposed heir is a minor incapable of stewardship. The animals, if any exist, are neglected at best. Millfield Corporation stands ready to take responsibility where this family cannot. Their words cut like knives, but Lydia gripped the journal beneath the table, feeling its rough leather steady her. Then Brennan rose. She laid out the deed, the trust, the caretaker's records. She called Hartwell to the stand where he spoke with quiet authority about every birth, every treatment, every fence mended. She called Henderson, who told stories of Samuel's work and his promise to protect the springs. She presented environmental studies proving Copper Ridge was more than pasture. It was a watershed, a sanctuary. Finally, she placed her hand on Lydia's shoulder. Your Honor, the heir herself wishes to speak. The courtroom rustled with surprise. Carter smirked as if expecting a child's stammer. But Lydia walked to the witness chair, small but unshaken. The bailiff swore her in, and she looked up at the judge with wide, steady eyes. Please, she began, her voice soft but clear. This ranch isn't abandoned. It's alive. My grandfather built it so animals could survive even when people forgot. Duchess Thunder patches, they're not numbers on a page. They're lives. If Millfield takes Copper Ridge, they'll be gone. But if you let us keep it, we can protect them and the water and the mountains for everyone. Her voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. I know I'm just a child, but I love this land. And sometimes love is stronger than money. The room fell silent. The judge leaned forward, his face unreadable. Carter's smirk faded. Claire's eyes shone with tears she tried to hide. When Lydia finished, she clutched the journal tightly, as if her grandfather's spirit was there beside her. The judge cleared his throat. Thank you, Miss Thompson. His tone was softer than before. As she returned to her seat, Duchess's face filled her mind steady and sure. No matter what the court decided, she knew she had spoken the truth. And truth, she thought, had a power no corporation could bury. The judge recessed for deliberation, leaving the courtroom in a hush broken only by the shuffle of papers and low whispers. Lydia sat stiffly between Claire and Hartwell, her small hands gripping the edge of the bench until her knuckles turned white. She had spoken her truth, yet the weight of it pressed heavier now than when she first stood before the court. Claire leaned down, murmuring, You did beautifully, child. Whatever happens, your grandfather would be proud. Hartwell nodded, though his eyes stayed on the door through which the judge had disappeared. He heard you, the old man said. That matters more than any lawyer's tricks. But Carter, seated across the aisle with his team, looked calm, almost amused. He whispered something to one of his attorneys, who smirked and shuffled a new stack of papers. After nearly an hour, the bailiff called everyone back to order. The judge returned, his expression stern, the lines around his mouth deeper than before. This case is unusual, he began, his voice echoing. On one side, a corporation with substantial resources and claims of economic development. On the other, a child heir, her guardian and community testimony asserting ongoing stewardship. Lydia's heart thudded painfully. The judge lifted a sheaf of papers. After review of the deed trust fund documents, caretaker records, and environmental surveys, the court acknowledges that Copper Ridge Ranch was never abandoned. Furthermore, the heir Lydia Mae Thompson holds rightful title as designated by her late grandfather. The property is therefore not subject to county seizure. The words landed like thunder. Claire gasped. Henderson thumped his stick against the floor in triumph, and Hartwell's shoulders sagged with relief. But the judge was not finished. However, stewardship requires more than inheritance. Given the heir's age, the court recognizes Patricia Brennan as legal trustee until Miss Thompson reaches majority. Additionally, due to documented ecological significance, the land is hereby placed under provisional protection as a sanctuary pending review by the State Environmental Board. Murmurs rippled through the room. Brennan exhaled slowly, her lips curving in the faintest smile. The judge banged his gavel. This court is adjourned. Relief flooded Lydia so strongly she nearly toppled from her seat. Claire caught her, holding her close. Henderson muttered, By God, Samuel, you stubborn old mule, you won. But across the room, Carter rose with infuriating composure. He buttoned his coat, turned toward Lydia, and inclined his head in mock respect. Congratulations, Miss Thompson, he said softly. You may have won today, but the board is another matter entirely. And corporations don't tire. Then he walked out, his lawyers at his heels. Hartwell's jaw tightened. He's not finished. Mark my words. Outside, the sky had turned heavy with snowflakes drifting down like feathers. Yet the cold couldn't dampen the warmth in Lydia's chest. They had won the first battle. Copper Ridge was hers, and for now safe. The following weeks brought both celebration and strain. News spread quickly. Local papers ran stories about the girl who saved Copper Ridge, and townsfolk stopped Lydia in the store to shake her hand or clap her shoulder. The school teacher organized a fundraiser Children drawing pictures of horses and goats that sold for coins and bills. Ranchers delivered hay bales to the ridge truckers, volunteered to haul supplies, and even the sheriff promised to keep an eye out for trespassers. Yet the shadow of Millfield lingered. Surveyors still drove past the trailhead, and anonymous letters arrived in Claire's mailbox warning her to reconsider. Hartwell doubled his visits, sometimes staying overnight in the ranch house. Henderson kept his rifle propped by his door again, something he hadn't done in years. Lydia, for her part, threw herself into the work. Dawn to dusk, she followed Hartwell, learning everything he would teach: how to spot colic in a horse, how to mend wire fences with nothing but pliers and grit, how to judge pasture health by the color of the grass. Her hands blistered and healed again. Her body ached each night, but she carried her pain like a badge. Duchess never strayed far. The mare followed her like a shadow, nudging her shoulder whenever fear threatened to overwhelm her. At night, lying in the old ranch house with Claire snoring softly in the next room, Lydia would whisper promises into the dark. "I'll keep you safe. I'll keep all of you safe." Then came the letter from Denver. Brennan unfolded it at the trailer table, her brow furrowed. "The State Environmental Board will convene next month to review Copper Ridge for permanent sanctuary status. Millfield has already filed objections." Claire groaned. "They'll drag us through hearings until we're bone-tired." "Which is why we need to prepare," Brennan said firmly. "Letters of support, documented testimony, photographs, videos, anything that proves Copper Ridge is unique and worth saving." Lydia looked up quickly. "Then we'll show them. We'll show everyone." For the next weeks, Copper Ridge became a hive of activity. Townsfolk with cameras came to record the springs, trickling from the mountainsides, the flocks of migrating birds resting in the meadows, the way the horses moved like a living river at dusk. The school children painted banners reading "Protect Copper Ridge." Claire baked pies for volunteers. Henderson told story after story on camera about Samuel's stubborn fight against developers, and Hartwell documented every animal with the care of a scientist. Millfield responded with glossy pamphlets promising jobs and prosperity, handing them out in town. They showed smiling families, new schools, paved roads. But most folks now knew the cost behind the images: poisoned, water-stripped hills, animals gone forever. Still, fear crept in. Some whispered that no child could hold back a corporation forever. Others worried about reprisals, about lawsuits that could bankrupt even the willing. One night, Claire sat with Lydia on the porch of the ranch house, the stars sharp and cold above them. "You've carried so much, my girl," she said softly. "More than most grown men could bear. If the board rules against us, if Millfield takes it anyway, I don't want you to think you failed." Lydia leaned against her aunt's shoulder. "But I can't let them win. Not here. Not after everything Grandpa built." Claire kissed her hair. "Then fight. But remember, winning isn't always about land. Sometimes it's about the love we pour into it, even if the world refuses to see." The words settled heavy and comforting all at once. As December deepened, preparations intensified. Brennan rehearsed arguments, Hartwell compiled medical records of animals treated, Henderson organized neighbors to travel to Denver for the hearing. Copper Ridge pulsed with a strange energy, half fear, half hope. And through it all, Lydia kept the journal close. Each night she read her grandfather's entries, tracing his words as though they were maps. She found strength in the way he recorded storms and droughts without despair, always ending with the same phrase: "We endure." On the eve of the board hearing, Duchess stood in the snowy field, her breath rising in clouds. Lydia pressed her forehead to the mare's neck, feeling the heartbeat steady and sure. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we tell them who we are." And the mare, as if understanding, stamped her hoof into the snow with a sound that echoed like a vow. The State Environmental Board convened in Denver on a morning so bitterly cold that frost clung to every railing outside the Capitol building. Buses and trucks had rolled in from Pine Creek before dawn, carrying townsfolk bundled in wool coats and scarves. Handmade signs leaned against the marble steps: "Save Copper Ridge, protect our water." No strip mines here. Inside the boardroom was vast, lined with oak panels and humming with cameras from local news outlets. 7 officials sat at a long table. Their nameplates polished, their expressions unreadable. On one side of the chamber, Millfield's lawyers laid out glossy charts, economic projections, and polished speeches about prosperity. On the other, Patricia Brennan arranged her folders. Dr. Hartwell kept his medical notes close, and Claire clutched Lydia's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. Lydia felt the weight of every gaze as she stood to speak. Her knees trembled, but Duchess's brass nameplate in her pocket gave her courage. "My name is Lydia May Thompson." She began, her voice small but clear. "I'm 10 years old. Copper Ridge Ranch belongs to me because my grandfather left it to me. But really it belongs to the animals who live there. They've been waiting for someone to fight for them." She lifted a photograph, Duchess standing proud, frost glinting in her mane. "This mare is Duchess. She's 24 years old. She remembers my grandfather, and she trusted me the first day I walked onto that land. We have nearly 200 animals. They are alive today because Copper Ridge is a sanctuary. If it's destroyed, where will they go? Where will the water go? What will happen to the mountains that have sheltered them for generations?" The room was silent. Even the board members leaned forward, pens still as if unwilling to miss a word. Then Dr. Hartwell rose. His voice was gravelly with age but steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have cared for these animals every week for 15 years. I've watched foals grow into stallions, healed wounds, buried the dead with respect. This is not sentimental fancy. It is stewardship, and it matters. Strip mining that mountain would poison 3 watersheds. It would kill not only animals but livelihoods across the valley. I beg you to weigh your profits against lives." Brennan followed with hard evidence, the environmental studies hidden in Samuel's hearth. The fraudulent filings Millfield had submitted to the state, the maps showing devastation that would stretch far beyond Copper Ridge. She spoke calmly but with iron beneath her words. "This board must decide whether to be complicit in corporate deception or to stand as guardians of Colorado's natural heritage." Millfield's lead lawyer countered with promises, hundreds of jobs, new schools' tax revenue. He dismissed the sanctuary as sentiment over sense. He even gestured toward Lydia, saying, "We should not let a child's emotions outweigh the needs of an entire region." But the crowd hissed and Claire leapt to her feet. "She may be a child, but she speaks more truth than all your lawyers combined." Her voice, cracked with fury and applause, broke out until the gavel silenced it. The board withdrew to deliberate. Hours dragged by in a waiting chamber that smelled faintly of coffee and fear. Townsfolk murmured prayers, Henderson told stories to keep Lydia from trembling, and Hartwell sat with his head bowed as if in quiet conversation with the past. Finally, the doors opened. The chairwoman of the board read the decision in a voice firm as stone. "After reviewing all testimony, documentation, and evidence, the Colorado Environmental Board unanimously designates Copper Ridge Ranch as a permanent wildlife sanctuary. Mining permits for the area are hereby denied in perpetuity." The chamber erupted. Cheers, sobs, people hugging strangers. Claire wept openly, clutching Lydia against her. Hartwell's face cracked into a smile broader than anyone had seen in years. Henderson muttered, "Samuel, you old fox, you did it." Outside, snow swirled under the city lights, but no one felt the cold. Cameras flashed as reporters crowded around Lydia. "How does it feel to have won?" one shouted. Lydia, blinking in the brightness, held Duchess's photo high. "It's not about me," she said. "It's about them, and about the mountain that will still be standing when we're gone." The next months transformed Copper Ridge. Volunteers came not only from Pine Creek, but from Denver, Boulder, even neighboring states. Students built new barns, carpenters repaired fences, engineers improved the water systems. Duchess's arthritis eased with the heated troughs. Thunder ran with the younger horses, goats filled the meadows with their bright chatter. A new sign was raised at the entrance, carved from Mountain Cedar Copper Ridge Sanctuary, dedicated to Samuel Morrison and to all who protect what cannot be replaced. Lydia kept her journal faithfully. Each day she recorded not only the animals' conditions, but also the people who came to help the boy from Denver, who had never touched a horse before, but left grinning after grooming Duchess. The elderly woman who baked bread for volunteers every Saturday. The high school group who built bat boxes to encourage natural pest control. One evening, as the sun bled red over the snow peaks, Claire found Lydia sitting on the porch steps, journal in her lap. "What are you writing tonight?" Claire asked. Lydia smiled faintly. "About legacy. Grandpa said it wasn't about money or land. It was about leaving the world better. I think I finally understand." Claire kissed her forehead. "You've given this town more than land. You've given us hope." As the first anniversary of the court ruling approached, a festival was held in Pine Creek. Banners fluttered, music played, and a parade of children carried drawings of animals saved at Copper Ridge. Lydia led Duchess at the head, her hand steady on the halter, her heart swelling as the crowd cheered. Later that night, standing in the meadow beneath a sky thick with stars, Lydia whispered to the horse beside her, "We did it, girl, and we'll keep doing it. As long as we're here, this place will never fall." The mare nuzzled her cheek breath, warm against the winter air, as if to seal the vow. And so Copper Ridge endured not because of wealth or power, but because one forgotten child had chosen to believe in something bigger than herself, and because a community had risen to stand beside her. The mountain winds carried that truth across the valleys. Some gifts come disguised as burdens, but the bravest hearts know they are blessings.